And they told you to fear the sky, to listen to the wail of the sirens the way others listen to church bells. You'd been taught to hold your backpack in a certain way, to tape the windows and wooden brace the cellar door. You grew up with the war on the radio, and ration cards in your glove box. For most of your life, the war had been a slow, grinding truth. And the cost, though, simply added to the price of everything from bread to gasoline. By 2070, it had been 18 years. You were in your mid-20s, and did not remember a world that had not known conflict. The war was for what the nation had once taken for granted. Petroleum and uranium, mostly, but other resources as well. You lived in the middle. Middle class, middle America, middle in the literal sense. A small town that sat a few hours from a city. You worked a manufacturing line and came home to a lustron house. Prefab steel panels bolted together on a lot you had scraped the money together for. 3 bedrooms, drafty in the winter, but yours. You liked the house because at the end of the day, after a long day of work, there's a place to sit down, to relax, and to count yourself happy. You met someone. Within a year you married. The following September, the September of 2027, a child came. For a few weeks, the world narrowed down to diapers and lullabies, to your wife's tired smile, the weight of a small head against your shoulder. You tightened the belt, sold the nicer car for an older model to keep a little cash in reserve. In your mind, the worst thing that could happen was the boss shutting down the plant. The worst thing had a long line to travel before it ever became the end of the world. Saturday, October 23rd, you wake up at 8, by habit. Muscles remembering the rhythm of early alarms, even on your days off. Coffee, the paper, the local feed on your Radiation King television. Around 9:40, a bulletin flashes across the screen. New York and Washington, D.C. hit. Then, far in the distance, a light blooms. A light where the state capitol is. The angle, the bloom telling you, without name or number, that Augusta had been vaporized. The sirens began like the cutting of a taut wire. You run. You run because the drills told you, and because some other, older, animal part of you recognizes the danger that you have no words for. You cram what matters into a bag. The radio, birth certificates, your father's old pistol. You take your wife and your newborn down to the basement, where the house smells of canned peaches and concrete. You know what to do. Seal the doors, seal the windows, huddle, and wait in place. It is, after all, what you were taught to do. It's what the manuals say to do. It's also smaller than you thought it would be. Smell of your wife's hair, the way the child fits against your chest as you hold him, the smallness of your world pressed down into a single place, against the impossibly thunderous world outside. And outside, the sky blackens, the dark rain comes, not the cleansing kind, but the thick, falling ash coats the porch and the steps. It smells of smoke and iron. At first, the air sits still, like a held breath. The radio grabs nothing but static. Hours become days. The community below changes from cautious to frantic and back again. Supplies last because you planned. Because you had a little discipline, a little luck, and some foresight. A week in, the mayor's voice comes over the radio. A town-wide broadcast. He says, "Meet at the church. We need a head count. We need a plan." You take your rifle, because a rifle makes you feel useful. Because the townspeople need people who can do things with their hands that used to be for work and not for war. You take your pistol because the thought of walking into a ring and trusting everyone or anyone not to turn on you feels naive. You bring your family to the church, where the parish hall has become a triage station. There are cots, boxes of canned food, and a doctor with steady hands, and a somewhat gaunt face who gives you and your family a slight check-over. A little radiation. Nothing to worry about. Nothing that a little rat away can't fix. The hope is a fragile thing. It knots up around small miracles. The town has a single advantage. A municipal nuclear well. Small and aging. Local and ugly. But still capable of pushing electricity into lines. The lines that act as bones connecting this small town together. Being a mechanist, you know just enough about circuits to coax back life into these dead wires. You spend nights under transformers, tightening bolts, splicing copper, flipping switches with hands that shake from lack of sleep or radiation. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. When the streetlights flicker and hum, people come to your porch like pilgrims. For one night, there is celebration. A roast, children running in the yards. People clap you on the shoulder and say you're lucky. You're skillful. You're a godsend. And they call you things as thanks and to make some sense of the world. But light doesn't heal what the ash eats away. When the cleanup begins, when the men in masks and gloves scrape the topsoil at the sheriff's instruction, a new sickness crawls out of the dirt. Those who do the scraping cough and bleed, and double over in pain. The radio gives you instructions. Remove the top 6 inches of soil, the mayor says, and we'll have a chance. So the town takes shovels and drag lines and scrapes, like pious men scraping the sin off of confession. The sheriff's men organize work parties and ration lists, and for a time, there is rhythm to the labor. But then the rhythm breaks. The first wave hits like a high wind. Fever, vomiting, skin rotting off in places where the fallout had embedded itself. The clinic fills. The doctor who was once a mechanic on tractors, now a man juggling deaths. His hands tremble as he tries to bandage what rots. The sick are placed in the school gymnasium, faces turned away not out of shame, but to spare the living the sight of what radiation does to a man. Your name comes up in the jobs list, the list of jobs men don't want to do. And this one being dig, fill, bury. You sign up because there is no glory in this work, only need. They hand you the keys to the backhoe because the town is efficient. Mass graves, says the sheriff. It's easier, he says, to save time and to save fuel. But you know the people you bury. The old woman from 3 doors down who used to bring pies on Thanksgiving. The boy who delivered newspapers and always stuck his tongue out at you when you walked by. You refuse a single pit. Night after night you dig graves, the way you remember, one by one, reverently. Your neighbors come to watch until they cannot. The sheriff grumbles about waste, but the people, they thank you. With the topsoil removed and the nuclear well running, the plan now is to plant. The sheriff declares the wells in the municipality to be too precious to waste on irrigation, so the fields will be watered with the water from the river. The same black-streaked water that runs past town. You know better than to act as if it's clean. You take to hunting. The animals you bring home show odd tumors when you skin them. A rabbit's liver buckles under yellow cysts. People eat because they are hungry. They do not ask too many questions. People eat because there is hunger. They do not ask too many questions because hunger makes for the best spice, so to speak. When the crops fail, the seeds sprout and then brown, or else they take and yield thin stalks that do not feed a family. The town grows thinner, ration lists cut from 3 tins to 2 to 1. The sheriff announces stricter measures to preserve its stores of food. Places everything into the church. The idea that being central control preserves the whole. Hoarding is a crime against the community, he says in public. The lock clicks shut. The key is stowed under a sleeve. You watch your neighbors starve because of a list from the church. You cannot look at them and do nothing. At night you slip meat that you've hunted in the day to their doors, pressed into the letter opening to let them know food had arrived. The next day you see the look in their eyes, a gratitude so fierce it becomes worship as quickly as it becomes obligation. You do this because mercy is a debt that feeds itself. You do this because the alternative is to watch a child, like yours, slowly die on the stoop with no food. The sheriff's men patrol, count, and make lists. The town's order is a brittle thing with a mean edge. He speaks of law in the voice of a man who has read the manual and decided it takes him to where he wants to go. He is not cruel at first, he is efficient, which is the worst kind of cruelty when lives hang in the balance. You and the others board up your homes. You stash your families in the woods with a couple of men to watch over them and keep them safe. You do not want to be the ones who start the bloodshed. But you know what men do when they're frightened. The sheriff organizes a collection. His men go door to door, making lists. They say they will catalog the goods for redistribution. But when they come across the homes that are boarded up, and no one answers when they pound on the doors, they open fire into the homes. But as they shoot into homes they do not know are empty, they fire into plaster, into glass, because someone, somewhere, told them it would make the people fall into submission and listen. The shots are not loud at first. They are methodical, almost ceremonial. But a bullet is a strange thing. It changes the air. People hear it, even when their 2 valley is over. You and your neighbors take position in the trees, old hunting rifles cradled in familiar hands. The men move with that animal confidence of people who have been given permission to do evil. They do not expect anyone to be waiting. When the first of their number shows his face to check a second-story window to see if it's open, he's met by a bullet that ends the notion of authority without ceremony. Within moments, it's over. The sheriff's men have no numbers, or the numbers run off. You and your neighbors do not take trophies. You do not parade the bodies around. You drag them to the river, let the current carry them away. Because you are not them. Because the sight of your own faces over the bodies of the dead is almost too much to bear. You return to the town, not as men in masks, but as the people everyone expects to be there. The ones who returned home. You walk into the church and find the sheriff in a stupor, his mind half-eaten by fever or guilt, or both. He rants of leadership and order. He babbles like a man who's been given a costume that does not fit him correctly. You and the men you're with decide swiftly. You shoot him. Not out of glee, not out of show, but out of necessity. The town's fear evaporates. Like fog when the first breath of sunshine comes. You remove the keys, open the vault, bring the food and medicine into the daylight. And there is no tribunal, no mantle raised in ceremony. You are not kings. You merely moved things into a space that you and your families can hold. People bring chairs and blankets, set up to take shifts at the doors. They leave you the radio and the ledger of rations. For now, you are the man your neighbors look to when their stomachs growl. Leadership is a mirror. When you look into it, you see a man tired from digging graves, who now has the knowledge to make hard choices. You call a meeting. You speak softly to your neighbors. We will not hoard. We will not become the very thing that killed our town. The radio becomes your conduit to whatever survives beyond the county lines. You chart routes to nearby towns that might have shelter or farms that still run. You organize salvage teams and send men to perimeter fields to check for rats, to comb abandoned houses for tins and medicine. You teach some of the younger boys to splice wire and how to be careful with a soldering iron. But the animals you feed on rot from the inside. A doe you gut at the edge of the field has nodules on its liver, something no hunter should ever see. The river water still runs black from time to time. Your hands are calloused and beautiful. They fix and they break, coaxing life back into things that should have died. Shelter is not a defense against a mind eroded by hunger. At first, you raid abandoned pantries with the shame of thieves. You check farmhouses for seeds and canned peaches, for kerosene and batteries. Sometimes you barge into a small town to find it an empty husk of what was. An empty table, a chair tipped over, pigs rotted in the fields. Other times you meet a family that has fortified a farmhouse and stands behind boards with bolt-action rifles. And then you must decide, barter or steal. You teach your men to be precise, take only what is necessary, and leave the rest. You do this with a gospel you do not believe in fully. We will not be raiders. But promises fray when food dwindles, and when children's eyes sink. At dusk, you look at your wife and your son, and decide you must go further. There is a town 200 miles away with a population that was the size of yours. You hope the town is empty. You hope the gates are open, and you hope that you will not need to force the gates open. You depart at dawn, a small convoy, no painted flags or painted faces, just men in old pickup trucks, with a prayer that none of the pickups will sputter and stop before you make it home. You move like men who have rehearsed a burglary. You ride to the farmhouse, you scavenge, you meet other survivors, and sometimes you trade. But the truth is plain. Where people held, they defended. And where they left, there was nothing left. And each time you took, you felt a chill. Not exactly guilt, not exactly pride. Something like the shadow that falls when the sun moves behind a cloud. People began to whisper, and they called you things at night. In neighboring towns, the sirens of survival and of authority spoke of looters. You called yourselves supply teams. Names are a small thing, till someone else writes it on the wall with charcoal and a skull painted next to it. And there are changes you didn't intend. The men who once shared their last piece of jerky behind the barn begin to put knives, the bristles, and sharpened sticks near doorways. They start to mark houses as ours, theirs, taken, dead. Strange rituals come to camp. A way to earn a share of meat that once would have been simply laughed off. There is a hardening in the faces of the young, and a softening in the faces of the old. The town you left behind is fed, and your family sleeps with fuller bellies tonight. But the cost is written in the way your men lean on their rifles in the quiet times when they pass each other in the morning. The story spread. One farmer says, men from a church came and took his tractor. Another says, men with tired eyes and a baby strapped to his wife's chest came for medicine and left a wagon in its place. Each telling rewrites the ledger a little. Other groups begin to mirror the tactics. Take quickly, leave no witnesses, take only what you need, but power is intoxicating. A man with a rifle in an audience learns to be louder. He learns to claim the moral high ground and to point at the man who had not done the same. Before long, the spare parts and the canned meat become trophies. And the trophies become flags. You try to keep your small code. No women taken, no children touched. You teach your men to avoid becoming monsters. You remind them of the graves that you all had to dig. Still, a boy who watched his mother die from that slow, black rain one winter grows up with a hard edge. He is no longer content to take only what he needs. He wants more than survival. He wants revenge on the whole world. He will carve horns to place upon his helmet, and he will call it justice. This is the day the first raider becomes more than a survivor. It is this day that the first raider looks at violence and tastes the ease of it as a solution. It's the day the first raider built his den and paints skulls upon the wall. The town you lead is not the only place where this happens. All across the land, if you could stitch together a map, you would see thousands of small circles where men once made the same decisions. Protect the family, take what you need, and when others threaten to take it back, take their lives. When those small choices multiply and echo, they become an ecosystem. Raiders begin to learn from each other, to trade tactics and patterns. The first raider who burned a house for a loaf of bread, it almost became a proverb. The path from hungry father to painted raider is not theatrical. It's bureaucratic and small, built on ration lines and missed funerals. You lie awake sometimes and count the cost. You think of the sheriff in the church and the way he tried to keep order and became small under the pressure. You think of the graves you dug and the names you whispered when you did. You think of your child's face at dawn, the way that face made you cruel and kind all at once. You are not blind. You see the line you teeter on. A step forward, you would call yourself a savior. A step back, and you would call yourself a thief. It is the line, the blur, that makes the Wasteland a place of stories, of saints and sinners both. Months pass. The men who once scavenged begin to set up camps with more structure. They take a house and bolt the gate shut. They form patrols and trade routes. They send out emissaries to other towns with demands and promises. Where once there was shame in taking without asking, now there is a claim of force, of law. The line between protector and predator narrows until it's almost invisible. The raider, in time, learns to become more. A skull on a doorway, a chant in the middle of the night, songs in the mud, crude laws about who can enter and who cannot. Small children learn to fear the painted men, and to mimic them in play. This is how the first raiders became an institution. There are nights you cannot sleep. You remember faces. You remember the hymn sung at the church before you took the keys. You remember right from wrong. You remember the sheriff's voice as he told you to trust him. That memory is a blade. You have lost faith in institutions, but not in the need to protect your kin. You know that what you have done has kept your child and wife alive. And what you have done will be marked in stories that will be told for years to come. You are not comfortable with the future you helped build. Still, you would do it again, because terror is selfish and hunger is certain. You would bury another friend to save your child. You would point your rifle to the silhouette of a man who seeks to take from you, and without a word, you would end him. The Wasteland is not kind to regrets. When historians someday stitch these small places into a map, they will call it the origin. But they will miss the texture of each decision. They will miss the nights of sharing, of secret rations slipped neighbor to neighbor. They will miss the moment when a good man chose to save his people, and in doing so, became the instrument of new order and new chaos. The first raiders were not born in a day. They were built over breakfasts, over graves, and over the slow decline of trust, over the thinness of mercy. You return to the church. You check the radio. The voice on the other end is ragged and far. There is talk of other towns, some that survived and others that burned. You post scouts. You prepare for winter, a winter that smells of old rain and metal. You teach your son how to hold a rifle. You tell him stories of the world before the war, in a voice that is gentle and small. You do this to be good, and you do this to be better than what you had become. The first raiders were not born out of an ideology. They were born of a scarcity that asked for choices and made monsters of good men. They were born because the law folded and left a gap that was filled by the quickest, the loudest, and the hungriest. They were born because in a world stripped to its bones, the first answer oftentimes was the only answer. And when the story is told, remember that it is not only the painted skulls and the horns that make the tale. It is the men that dug the graves, the women who sewed the bandages, and the child that slept with a full belly. All against the backdrop of a cold, merciless winter, and the small choices that they had to make. In the wasteland, there are no clean hands. There are hands that help, hands that take, and hands that give back. And each is the part of the same story. You set a child's toy down in a pew at the church, dust shifting as sunlight slides a blade of light across a face painted in soot. Somewhere outside, a convoy disappears down the road, kicking up dust. The radio murmurs, and you take your rifle and stand at the door. Thank you for watching, if indeed you still are. I'd like to thank Eric Hewitt and Big O for making this video possible. If you'd like to become a member too, link is down in the description. I got the idea for this one, believe it or not, from a comment off of a short. One of the shorts I put out was simply, the first raiders were just people trying to feed their family. And I got quite a few views on that, so I figured I'd turn it into a long, well, this. Figured the Joshua Graham video was pretty good, so I'd do something akin to that here, except I'd set it in the rarely used second person. Anyway, I'm gonna get this finished and uploaded. See you guys in the next one.